Week 4 is come and gone. Not only has it taken our hearts, it's taken some of our favorite players' ACLs, their own quarterbacks, tackle their own wide receiver. Jonathan Taylor suffers another injury, and as we've learned early and often this season, the NFL is unrelenting in terms of players dropping like flies. Jake, that's what makes this video so important. The DFS Early Look is the earliest look that you can get into this week's DFS slate. And I got to tell you, week 5 is going to be rough. Let's dive in.
What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
I'm Thomas Tipple at El Nostra Thomas. With me, as always, the man who writes the best DFS Early Look article in the business. That's Jake Tribbey. You can find him at Jake Tribbey on socials. Jake, this week, tough. You were telling me before we hit the record button, the tight end, it just gets worse. And we're really at the bottom of the barrel, it feels like. But that doesn't mean there is no hope for the slate. So let's dive in where you want to start here, as we always do, with quarterback and somebody that absolutely smashed this last week despite multiple turnovers.
Yeah, it's a gross week for the tight end position, but not nearly as bad at quarterback. Thankfully, starting off here with Jordan Love. Only prices the QB6 on DraftKings, a little bit more expensive on FanDuel as the QB5. Now, he played great for fantasy purposes in his first game back from injury. He led the week in passing yards, and he finished second in quarterback fantasy points. Of course, that was in a tough matchup in an extreme negative game environment. He also threw 3 picks, but week 5 should be notably easier for Jordan Love. Los Angeles has allowed the league's second highest passer rating, the most yards per attempt, and the 5th highest completion percentage over expectation. We all credit Washington as the league's worst pass defense. And while the Commanders have been objectively terrible, the Rams' pass defense is giving them some serious competition for the worst in the league. We all know that Jordan Love can shred a bad defense. I mean, he just had a great fantasy game against a really good defense this past week. And he's even easier to stack than ever with a condensed target tree on the way after Christian Watson's injury.
Yeah, I mean, Christian Watson going down is going to open the way for some other wide receivers that we may or may not talk about later. But on top of that, let's talk about the king on the streets, the king of Sunday Night Football. Derrick Henry finds his way into the article this week.
Yeah, it's rare that I'll write up the most expensive player at a particular position, but Derrick Henry, especially at 7,800 on DraftKings, is just far too cheap. Safe to say the big dog is back. Baltimore has turned to extreme levels of running the football. They posted a negative 16% pass rate over expectation over the last 2 weeks. And that has been incredible for Derrick Henry, who's dropped at least 33 DraftKings points in back-to-back games, averaging 175 rushing yards per game and 7.1 yards per carry over that stretch. Now, the Ravens are 2.5-point favorites this week against Cincinnati. And that's an important note since Derrick Henry is notoriously game script dependent. He's 67% more productive in wins than losses since 2021. And the Cincinnati run defense likely won't slow Henry down either. They rank bottom 3 in missed tackles and yards allowed after contact, and they've allowed the 7th most rushing yards per game. Getting Henry here at a sub 8K price tag in this spot feels like a fire sale.
Yeah, just an absolute bargain, really. Potential league winner every slate when, again, Ravens are projected. That's not homerism, I promise you. He's just that good in wins. Let's talk about the second RB on the list, and I mentioned it early, but Jonathan Taylor is banged up. But that doesn't mean all hope is lost for the DFS slate.
Yeah, Jonathan Taylor being banged up certainly does open some value here in Trey Sermon at just 5,700. He's priced as the RB23 over at DraftKings. Now, Taylor's high ankle sprain was described as mild, which likely keeps him off IR. Certainly good news, but his week 5 status does look to be pretty up in the air. I would be surprised if he played. After he left the game with 8 minutes remaining in week 4, Trey Sermon handled 86% of running back snaps at all 4 running back opportunities. Now, just half a quarter of action doesn't really give us a great indication of what the backfield split would be if Taylor can't go this week. But it's at least encouraging that Sermon has been the clear number 2 so far. He's outsnapped RB3 Tyler Goodson 41-13, and he's earned 91% of non-Jonathan Taylor backfield opportunities this year. Trey Sermon could be a bell cow this week, and if he is, he's far too cheap against the Jacksonville defense that's allowed the 7th most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs this year.
Yeah, we absolutely love a spot like that. A running back this cheap, all signs pointing to me playing him probably way more than I should play Trey Sermon in any lineup. But let's talk wide receivers, fantasy points favorite, expected fantasy points darling, Diontae Johnson. It's real with Andy Dalton.
It is real. I mean, you already mentioned the expected fantasy points. He's always crushed in expected fantasy points, but now he's really scoring some real tangible fantasy points. It's been awesome. Diontae Johnson went from the 39th most expected fantasy points per game in weeks 1 and 2 with Bryce Young to the second most behind only Nico Collins once Andy Dalton took over in weeks 3 and week 4. It's been an incredible transformation. Johnson ranks 5th in first read target share, 2nd in end zone targets, 5th in receiving yards per game, and 3rd in fantasy points per game since Andy Dalton took over. This has been such a dramatic shift that Diontae Johnson has as many end zone targets over the last 2 weeks as he had catchable targets in the first 2 weeks. And if he's now a mid-range wide receiver 1, which, everything that we've seen in the last 2 weeks indicates, his pricing on both sites, but especially DraftKings, presents a massive discount in comparison to his usage. The matchup this week is bottom 5 on paper. Chicago's pass defense has actually been pretty great from a schedule adjusted perspective through the first 4 weeks. But I'm really not sure that matters much when Diontae Johnson is seeing volume that's significantly better than his price tag. I mean, wide receiver 17 on DraftKings is ridiculous compared to, wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 usage so far.
Yeah, at those prices, he could really break the slate if this man finishes in that top 5, top 8 conversation at those prices. Talking about cheap wide receivers, we have possibly one of the cheapest stacks for big upside probability that you could have this week, thanks to the Christian Watson injury that our own Ryan Heath talked into existence in one fateful tweet. You can find that at RyanJ_Heath. It won't be too far down the list. Let's talk about Dontayvion Wicks.
Yeah, so you heard me mess up and say wide receiver 39 for Diontae Johnson. That's because I was so excited about this Dontayvion Wicks price tag on DraftKings. He's the wide receiver 39 at just $5,000. Now, Christian Watson suffered a high ankle sprain, as you mentioned, at the end of the first quarter on Sunday, and that led to Wicks finally seeing a full-time route share across the final 3 quarters of the game. He dominated Packers receiving usage, leading the team and finishing second on the week in expected fantasy points. And he was the clear wide receiver 1 in Green Bay by both first read target share and air yardage share. Sure, this is just 3 quarters of football, but it's important to remember that Wicks has always been a part-time player. His 80% route share after Christian Watson left the game would be his best single game mark ever. And he's posted ridiculously encouraging advanced efficiency metrics in the small sample of routes he's given us. Rushing and separation score and first down per route run, as Ryan Heath outlined in his 5 stats to know article this week, which is a great read, and you can find that on FantasyPoints.com. If Dontayvion Wicks can just maintain the 0.48 fantasy points per route run he posted last season, he would average 13 fantasy points per game on an 80% route share, and that would rank 18th best among slate-eligible receivers. And again, he's priced as the wide receiver 39 on DraftKings, which makes him a great play in a matchup with a bottom 3 pass coverage unit, as we already highlighted in the Los Angeles Rams.
And again, anytime you can get this cheap of a stack, I mean, you're looking at all upside. Now we have to talk about the sad part. I do always hate that we end these programs on kind of the most depressing position in the game. Look, we got Kyle Pitts putting up straight zeros. We've got Mark Andrews consistently putting up straight zeros. The search for a desperation tight end play has never been more important in our fantasy football lives. I think you have the right one. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, so it's Colby Parkinson. He's 3,700 on DraftKings, price of the tight end 13. Actually, a bit better of a value on FanDuel, 5,100, the tight end 16. Let me preface this by saying the tight end position is a complete disaster. The players seeing the best usage at the position Jake Ferguson isn't on the main slate, leaving us with just 3 tight ends averaging double-digit expected fantasy points per game. And one of those players, Trey McBride, is in the concussion protocol at the time of recording. Well, the tight end position is this when it's this bad, it's generally a good idea to pay down for some guaranteed production, as the extra salary will help your lineup at far more important positions. We just haven't seen much upside at tight end, but we know we can get that upside at quarterback, running back, wide receiver. And that's effectively the case this week for Colby Parkinson. He's tied for the team lead in targets and second in first read target share since Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp left the lineup. His 82% route share over that stretch leads all tight ends, and his 10.5 expected fantasy points per game would rank third best on the main slate at the tight end position over the full season. I'm not particularly excited to play Parkinson, but he has one of the best price-adjusted roles on this slate at the tight end position.
Let's be real. Right now, we're not really excited to play any tight end. We're just picking one and hoping, because that's all you can do. But you don't have to just hope for the entirety of your lineup. Like I mentioned, if you're watching this and you have not read the full article, the DFS Early Look at FantasyPoints.com, take a look for the link in the description below, because you are not going to want to miss the full article. We are here every single week to give you the earliest and the best look at DFS. We will be right back here, same bat time, same bat channel next week. For Jake Tribbey, I'm Thomas Tipple. We will see you guys at the top of the leaderboards.